Welcome back my friends of WildRift to another RiftGuides WildRift video, and today we are going to take a look at the high elo tier list, and let's be honest, Gwen is a fun champion. But before we jump right into the video, what's your favorite new champion or the new 4 that have been teased and actually approved? Now let's start with the tier list, and let's start with the Baron lane, and here we have Gwen. Gwen as a champion is absolutely funny to play, but there's one key difference to other champions. In comparison to those, you would run the summoner spell Ghost. Now let me tell you why. Gwen as a champion has an innate gap closer with a third ability. To make proper use of that, it's significantly easier to play the game if you have Ghost because you're just able to stick on the enemy. You're just able to alt attack and dash after them over and over again, and they have no ways of escaping. It just makes it 10 times easier. And let's be honest, if you have a dash on that low of a cooldown, do you really need flash? Not really. Also, when it comes to laning, this champion is quite interesting to play once you reach level 2. On level 1, you're not really the most potent character in terms of strength, but starting level 2, you start to pack a punch with your scissors, as in your first ability. You just need to stack it up and then you can chop down any enemy you like. And to make sure you do so in proper fashion, you can relocate yourself by pressing your first ability and your third ability in sequence. That way you can relocate to any position you need to without losing too much damage. And don't worry about the enemy building any MR, because it doesn't really matter, because most of your damage comes from true damage whatsoever. Another thing we can talk about is the fact that Gwen can itemize defensively after her core items. She is a DPS, true damage character that just runs down the enemy champions. The tankier she becomes, the more potent she becomes as well. And in this game, it's very hard to itemize magic resist towards her normal magical damage. It just doesn't work because the items available are quite bad. And this is our full tier list for the Baron lane. Now that we are done with the Baron lane, it's time to move over to the jungle role, and here we have Gwen again. In the past, we had very limited options when it came to AP junglers, especially in a competitive environment. But for solo queue, there were quite a few options such as Echo, Morgana, Evelynn, you know the drill. But now we have another one with Gwen. Gwen loves full clearing her jungle and then accelerating the game once she is scaled enough. She can start with a Nashor's Tooth or with a Riftmaker, depending on what she wants, but if she wants to prioritize farming, then of course the Nashor's Tooth will be better. In direct contrast to this, obviously the Riftmaker is gonna help you in teamfights significantly more than the Nashor's Tooth can do, because you're more tanky, you have more Omnivamp, and with Conqueror you have like 20 Omnivamp, unless they patch the item again so you get more of what they actually teased us. For the jungle clear, you have to keep something in mind nonetheless. With the changes to the minion speed on the side lanes, you will not get a leash anymore, so starting with the Croc Camp seems the most ideal thing you can do. That way you can put the Croc Camp on cooldown and just clear around the map. Don't forget, the Croc Camp runs the most experience and gold on the map, therefore getting it on cooldown is just the best you can do. The next thing you have to keep in mind is that if you want to walk into the river, it's always a beneficial thing for you to have your first ability fully stacked when you walk into it. That way, in case there's a scuttle fight happening, you have your most damaging spell in terms of DPS and burst ready and can just initiate a fight with Ghost, for example. Otherwise, it might take a little bit too long and then you're unable to either secure the scuttle or kill the enemy champion. Don't forget, every second in jungle matters, and being efficient is something that's really not that common in WildRift. But if you become more efficient and consequent with what you're doing, especially avoiding deaths around scuttle crabs, your win rate will skyrocket. And this is our full tier list for the jungle role. For our next pick of the patch, we have Kassadin in the mid lane, and now let's talk about the problem with Kassadin. In this game, there's no real counter to Kassadin because Kassadin can survive any lane. To actually deal with him nonetheless, you need Lucian mid lane plus a proper wave setup, plus your teammates being around to dive him or deny him a wave, because one single character will forever be unable to touch a Kassadin. Fleet footwork and Ruby Crystal are just way too broken for him to fear anyone during the laning phase. But don't get me wrong, there's ways of losing with Kassadin in lane. It's called taking Electrocute and Amplifying Tomb. Never, and I repeat, never do this. Always go for the Ruby Crystal and the Fleet Footwork. That way you're literally unable to die, and then you can play towards your win condition, scaling. Kassadin as a champion loves to scale and needs to scale to carry the game. And once he has reached his 2 or 3 item power spikes, he starts one-shotting people around the map, and he can just jump over walls on cooldown thanks to his Rift Walk. And with that in mind and his powerful, or at least the most powerful ability of his kit, the third ability, he lays waste to enemy teams. Because in this game you always want to max your third ability first, but on level 1 you always start with your second ability. That way you can poke the enemy on range, deal with the wave, farm into anything you need, and that way it becomes super easy to pilot this champion. Just make sure you don't grief your own lane. As an example to maximize your champion's kit, when you play for example against an Orianna and she uses an ability towards your direction, you can just tap your second ability to get your passive shield. If you use abilities close to enemy champions, you'll get a magic shield, that way you'll mitigate a lot of damage. Especially if you froze in another auto attack while you trade back with your auto attack, you will heal up with fleet footwork and deal significantly more damage than she is doing to you because of the shield and the fleet footwork, and then she loses the trade. That is something you need to continuously abuse to make sure that you get the best out of laning. As you transition into the later stages of the game, you don't want to stay mid lane. That is something that will keep you behind forever. You want to go into the side lane and make sure people come to you and pay attention to you, that way you make it easier for your team to play the game. On top of this, you'll also get more gold because you have easier access to all the side lane camps, and Kassadin is just a crazy 1v1 champion. And this is our full tier list for the mid lane. Next on our list for this tier list is Samira in the AD carry position. This champion has received a crazy buff when it comes to base health and damage. Let me tell you this champion is fun, crazy and broken in a solo queue environment, but don't get me wrong, in a team environment as in a competitive environment, this champion is very hard to execute because of his short range. This is something most AD carries fall victim to. AD carries are very limited against good players. But AD carries are so much easier at abusing weaker enemies or bad enemies, because their frequency in which you can kill enemies is so much higher compared to mages. But it all depends on your ability to play them and the enemy's inability to play against them. Always keep that in mind. You might also say it's very similar to playing Katarina, just as an AD champion, because Samira does exactly what Katarina does. Once there's one kill happening in a teamfight, Samira can go crazy with her third ability reset. She can also just block any projectile possible whenever she has a second ability available. It's just that nice to have. But the prime goal for Samira in a teamfight is to stack up the S rank as fast as possible. And once she has that, she can start wreaking havoc through all the enemy team, just as long as there's someone to initiate the fight for her, because otherwise she just gets cancelled, exhausted and sent into the Shadow Realm. But if she waits and is patient enough, she'll be able to kill everyone in her way and just have a good time. And this is our full tier list for the AD carry role. Last but certainly not least, we have my favorite champion in the support role, next to Karma of course. It's Soraka. So many of you would say that Soraka isn't a good champion, but let me tell you how wrong you are. This champion is absolutely broken in the laning phase, in the mid game and late game because of multiple things. In laning phase, Soraka can just effectively trade level 1 and then use disadvantage to get level 2 first, and then start healing her allies up again. You need to start with a Ruby Crystal and most likely with a Depth of Carapace and your first ability. Then, once you hit an enemy, you gain 60 healing, level 1 from your first ability, and on level 2, your second ability heals an ally for up to 90. Now you combine both since you transfer your first ability's healing on an ally as well, and you heal them for 150. Plus you reduce the healing cost of your second ability by a lot. That way you can effectively trade over and over and over again and make the enemy life living hell. Don't forget, since you're running Airy, the healing over time effect from your first ability, if your Airy isn't on cooldown, will also apply to your ally, granting him a shield. Therefore trading becomes even more powerful. That way Soraka becomes one of the most potent champions in laning. People just are too afraid to play her and too afraid to trade with her, because there's also another thing you have to keep in mind. Soraka scales with the IQ of your teammates, which sounds very weird, because your HP bar isn't your true HP bar, and that makes a lot of people just run away from the fight when they're easily winnable with a Soraka. But that's just how it goes. But with the Protect enchant and her ultimate, things become very funny very fast. And this is our full tier list for the support role. Thank you all for watching, and if you're interested in more RiftGuides content, you should stay tuned because we have more coming soon, and there will be even more things you should take a look at. See you soon.